Red Bull posted that Max Verstappen had a bird in his brake duct the entire race. So just goes to show you what's good for the goose ain't always good for the gander. But cheers, everyone. Welcome back to Figuring Out the Formula. I'm your host, Kyle. I'm here with Chandler and Patrick, as always. What a Grand Prix it was. It was the Canadian Grand Prix this past weekend, and I thought it was awesome. It had everything there was to have. It had rain. It had great qualifying. It had surprise qualifying, a very fun race, and some other things sprinkled in there. Before we jump into this race weekend, let's jump into the last race weekend. We had some predictions on who would win the Canadian Grand Prix. Two of us were correct. The other person is an idiot. I mean, wrong. You're looking at one of the person that was correct. I was correct and Pat was correct. We guessed Max Verstappen to get the dub. Can't be stopped this year. And we were correct. But unfortunately, Chandler, you're the idiot. Yeah. I mean, the wrong one. Yeah. Sorry, buddy.
I'm the idiot. Look, I'm just trying to go bold. Hey, you know what? I will say this. At least my prediction didn't go like DNF. At least my prediction finished on the podium. So I'm going to go bold the rest of the year. You have my word that I will not pick Max to win another race just because I want the one time that Max doesn't win a race for some whatever fluke reason that I have the best chance of winning it. So I'm not going to pick Max. So I'll be the idiot the rest of the season. Call me the village idiot, but.
So we'll get into more of your predictions at the end of the episode, but a sneak peek for the upcoming races, we're no longer going to be able to pick Max Verstappen. Let's jump right into the practice session. Practice was pretty fun. We saw a bunch of different conditions on the track. Wet conditions, dry conditions, sunny, cold. Like you said last episode, Canada, you never know what you're going to get. That's just how it is, and that's what it was for FP1. FP1, Pierre Gasly had some power issues that left him stranded on the track, and, it's not a very good start to a race weekend when your car is just lying dead on the track.
Yeah, not a real head scratcher of it is that we're only 2 weeks, 3 weeks removed from Monaco, where had one of the greatest showings. Like after your upgrade, you're like, okay, this is a really promising upgrade. And to kind of come out flat, in FP1, you've got Gasly like just dead in the water, literally. I mean, it's kind of like a head scratcher of like, all right, where do we go here? Like, we'll get further into it, but it wasn't Alpine's only issue in the early stages of the race weekend, but just kind of a head scratcher of, did you just blow your wad and, your upgrade is gone? Like, I mean, that's a saying, by the way. That's a Scott Jordan saying.
All right, whatever.
Hey, those are your words. Those are your words, not ours.
The big aspect of his power failure was later on in the FP1 session, the CCTV, so that's the system responsible for the lights around the track, and that connects to the driver's steering wheels to say, hey, there's a yellow flag, double yellow, red flag, whatever. Well, CCTV stopped working during FP1, and it shortened the session. Normally, practice sessions are 60 minutes long, and there's 3 of them. Well, with the Pierre Gasly issue, which led to a red flag, it stopped the time in FP1. And then CCTV, it's a safety failure. They had to end the session because they couldn't get it fixed. That kind of led to FP2 later on in the day that the FIA extended the FP2 session from 60 minutes, like I said, to 90 minutes in order to make up that time. You saw a lot of teams bringing upgrades to this race or improving the upgrades they've brought in the past. So the time was very valuable, especially for the drivers who have never even been to Canada to drive the circuit. Pat, what do you think is the biggest learning curve here at the Canadian Grand Prix.
So from what I saw, especially last year when Chandler and I had gone,
yeah, thanks for the invite.
Hey, we invited you.
Okay. That's why I said thanks.
Now in between gambling sessions of the track, Chandler and I were watching the practice sessions, and I think the big things that I actually noticed were because the Canada track is really elongated, and it comes to essentially what's two hairpins at either end. With the weather in Montreal, it gets like halfway rainy sometimes, or just a torrential downpour, which can really create a lot of variable conditions on the track, especially when, at the end of the track, you're coming off straightaways into these hard turns where you can see a lot of drivers, have to take away cutoffs, and like cut through corners and things like that to just bail on a lap. And we were seeing it all this weekend, all last year, which especially at turn one, where actually they put, for some reason, there used to be just like an open gap.
The worst wall ever, dude.
Yeah, there used to just be an open gap, and it's like, put grass there, something to slow them down. And so they're like, no, let's just put like a flat wall during the practice sessions. And you could definitely see a lot of the younger drivers. I think Yuki actually almost bended into that wall and then had to literally do a U-turn in this tiny little, like, I don't know what you would call it, like a cul-de-sac that they made,
but it was grass.
Just to get back
it
on
was
the
a
track.
Grass cul-de-sac.
Yeah, and then it's like you're facing the other cars that are coming towards you now, and you still have to pull out. And so I think it was definitely a big learning curve for all the people that either haven't driven here in a while, or it was their first time driving on the track, just because you're coming in with a lot of variables, especially at high speeds, and then it's actually really dangerous if you miss at all.
During the FP2 session, Pat talked about like the weather being a factor in Canada. You never know what kind of weather there's going to be at the track on any given day. Well, during FP2, there was significant rain. I mean, the water on the track, I think Valtteri Bottas said that it's perfect weather for a duck.
Yeah.
Well, it was. I mean, there were ponds everywhere on the circuit. It was very difficult to watch, because half the time the drivers are like, fuck this. We're just going to go into our pits. We're going to go into the paddock. That's it. We're done. It's not worth the risk. We might crash the car, whatever it might be. They just said, no, this isn't worth it.
Yeah. And to kind of go back on, A, the weather point, but B, the kind of the learning curve, is that the best way I can describe it is that this is probably one of the first true like road courses that we see on the calendar. It's like you got Bahrain and Spain, but there's a lot of wide runouts. Canada, there's not wide runouts. Now so you're going a lot faster, but there are those intricacies of like, hey, the cut throughs. So you combine that with FP1 being cut short because of safety issues, right call, like the last thing you want is all that. But you have 20% of the grid has never driven here before, because remember, Formula 2 does not drive here because it's overseas. And then you also throw in a couple of other seat changes that they're in their new car. It's their first time driving in that car here. Is you got to learn. And it really, like, it's unfortunate that, hey, it's raining. Now, last year when we were there, qualifying was raining. But again, it's kind of all, it's tough to be a learner. And like I said, I mean, you could go slip and sliding. I know we saw it obviously throughout qualifying and practice, and then last year as well. Is like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there's a slight amount of rain. Like, it gets wet quick on that part, because you're almost at sea level too. So there's not like a lot of runoff of the water. So it doesn't have to be raining hard in Montreal.
The ironic part of all the rain that we got this whole weekend was during FP2, Nico Hulkenberg, his car caught on fire.
Went full Adele and set fire to the rain.
It's Adele, typical Canada fashion. I mean, do they not have enough fires that Haas has to bring their own? I mean, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Haas,
and dude. it was in the worst possible spot too. Like he had just missed the pit entry, and then all of a sudden his car just turned into an egg roll. Like,
yeah. Oh man, it's just
it's a Haas thing.
Yeah, it's something. What did I say last episode? It's Ferrari's going to Ferrari. Well, Haas is going to Haas. It's just
ass is gonna
ass.
That wasn't the only thing that happened during FP2. We talked earlier in FP1 that Pierre Gasly, maybe the lead Alpine driver. Well, he had issues in FP1. Well, his co-driver, Esteban Ocon, he had issues in FP2. His car stopped on the track just as Pierre Gasly's did in FP1. It's pretty disappointing because Alpine has a strong upgrades. Like they've presented strong upgrades. They even got a podium because of it. And it's just not working out. When you have two cars dead in the water on the track during practice, something's fucked up.
Yep. You've done something wrong.
Alpine is kind of lacking in performance, so to speak. But I mean, right from even the beginning race of the season, it feels like, every handful of races, they'll just have some issue like this where it's an electrical failure, transmission failure, where the car just dies and then they can't actually get any data that they need or anything like that. Of which I think this weekend they got really lucky that this only happened in the first practice and second practice. But I feel like if they really don't remedy this type of thing, I don't know if it's maybe, some mechanic's just not tightening a screw the right way or something like that, or it's just actual faulty parts. But in the long run, this actually could really, affect their chances of securing a higher place, which I think a lot of people are slating them to in the championship. But it's just something that they don't really talk about either. So, people don't know, are you actually fixing this? Or is it just going to keep happening every now and then? You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, if they're going to take that next step forward, they've got to, the last couple of years, last 3-4 years is like when Daniel Ricciardo went to Alpine, Renault at the time, they were going to build the car around him, and then he left to go to McLaren. And then Fernando Alonso comes in, and you think, okay, we can, and he leaves Alpine for Aston Martin. And at the time, we're like, what is he doing? But there was like, you think maybe there was something to both of them. Maybe both like those drivers who are seasoned veterans. I mean, Fernando more than Daniel, see like, okay, maybe like Alpine can get us here, but they can't get over the top. It's like, you got to take that next step to compete, because you could put people on the podium at Monaco and you can put people in like top fives, but when you have issues like this, it kind of brings you back down, and it's like, okay, well, Monaco's a one-off. So it's kind of like, how do we handle this?
I think the word both y'all are looking for is consistency. So a lot of people use reliability as their word for this kind of issue, but I think Alpine's reliable. I think they're just very inconsistent. So their cars are reliable. Granted, we see issues like we're talking about, but the consistency it's just like with Ferrari. They could have a very fast car, but have bad strategy one week. Or their car could have a slight error and their strategy just goes to shit. It's not very consistent. If they were able to have a decent car, but great strategy every week, they're running in the top 8, I would say. Yep. Give or take. I mean, that's probably a fair assessment, around 8-ish for at least one of their drivers. It doesn't matter if it's Gasly or Ocon, but I think another team that could benefit from more consistency is Ferrari. We saw in FP3, Carlos Sainz wrecked the shit out of his car. He took the whole front end off of his car. It was raining. It was wet, but dude, FP3 happens on the same day as qualifying. It happens in the morning, and qualifying normally happens in the afternoon-ish time. Like, dude, you're setting yourself up for failure. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, I think the F in Ferrari stands for failure
or fucked. I don't know.
It's like, to me, and I'm no strategist for F1, but it's like,
say that again.
I'm no strategist for F1.
Okay.
However,
I still said it wrong, but okay.
Like, yeah. You kind of get take your practice 1 and practice 2 stuff, make your best guess to get it. And then FP3 should be qualify. You should have one little go round of your qualifying simulation, and then the rest of it is if you need to make some slight minor critiques, that's fine. Then run your race simulation for a few laps and say, all right, we're good. Bring it in. We'll go to qualifying. Is I will never forget Sebastian Vettel in FP3 on Saturday morning. Rain, very similar to what we had this year. He was going like P3, P4, got into qualifying. It's still raining. Got into qualifying, was 19th and out in Q1. So it's like that's the flip side of it, is that you sit there and like, I remember me sitting in the grandstands going, oh, I'm taking Sebastian Vettel at plus 750 front row start, and then goes out because he's like second or third in time. So I mean, you got like two flip sides of that. But like you said, Ferrari is over here wrecking their car 2 hours before qualifying starts. It's just like Ferrari's going to Ferrari.
Yeah. Chandler's like, take my money. Take my money.
I mean,
Chandler was like, load move on up. He's like, please load. Please load.
Look, hey.
Oh, God. That was a practice session in the Canadian Grand Prix. You heard a little bit of Chandler's gambling tales, good and bad, I guess. We move into Q1 and we talk about consistency and reliability issues. Well, at 14 minutes and 33 seconds left in Q1, Zhou Guanyu for Alfa Romeo had power issues. As soon as he pulled out of his garage, he had power issues. Had to go all the way around the track, stopped a couple times, called a red flag for him, and he got it hooked back up. It was the biggest waste of fucking time. There's no penalty for that as long as you're able to get it started on your own. But I don't think he should have been able to qualify. Like, I think you should be out. If you cause a red flag, you should be out, regardless if you can keep your car on or not. You know what I mean? Because it's different than if you spin out and go into the gravel. Normally, that's a safety car, right? If you have significant damage, you're not restarting anyways. But if you come to a stop because of a mechanical issue, that should be it, because he ruined everybody else's fucking laps.
I think it's a solid baseline to start at with that. But I feel like there might have to be some kind of like mitigating circumstances. So if you have like Charles Leclerc a couple years ago binning it into the wall and, oh, I just secured pole because I had crashed, that's one thing, but it's also one thing if your mechanics can't put your car together correctly. But I feel like with qualifying, it's also rock in a hard place because, most of the time qualifying is within hundredths of seconds. So it's like, do you add, a tenth of a second to someone's time for something like that?
Well, I don't think you can add time, but I think you can cancel that. Like, obviously his laps cancel if he's stopped on the track, but I'm saying he ruined everybody else's laps. So there was 14 and a half minutes left in the Q1 session when this happened. If there were only 30 seconds left and all those laps got canceled, how many qualifying efforts would he have ruined?
Exactly.
So he should be at the end of the grid, in my opinion, or wherever. If this happened in Q2, he should be at 15. You know what I mean?
I was going to say that I think it kind of goes with the qualifying, because with the time differences in Q1 through Q3, you have just screwed at least 7 other drivers. Like there may be like 2 drivers that are like waiting as long as they can, that like whatever. Q1, I think you could be a little more lenient, but if this happens in Q3, I think that, hey, there's got to be some penalty of some sort. So,
but I mean, the difference between 18th at some tracks, even if you want to go to 20th and 7th place are very minute. So
fair point.
I think that just, you have to make it across the board. Like if you cause a non-crash, like if there's a non-crash red flag due to your car, you should be out of qualifying last place in whatever group that is. That's just my opinion. It actually ended up maybe like, this is the ultimate ball don't lie, but that actually ended up happening anyways. In Q1, Zhou Guanyu, like I said, he had power issues, but he qualified last. Then you had Logan Sargent, Nick DeVries, Pierre Gasly, and Yuki Tsunoda. You had both AlphaTauris out in Q1. Dog water. I mean, they're last place in the Constructor Championship. Dog water. I don't think there's anything to discuss with them. It's I want to save y'all's breath because it's a waste of time.
Only one sentence I got to discuss AlphaTauri is that it is phenomenal how Red Bull owns the best team on the grid and how they own by far the worst team on the grid. And it's like, it just kind of baffles my mind that we have a Red Bull owned sandwich on the grid.
You know what I think it's more like a ice cream sandwich, like a Red Bull ice cream sandwich, but except one side fell on the concrete and it's stuck to the concrete and the FIA just ripped it up. So there's only like 3/4 of a sandwich left.
So that's the Red Bull sandwich. Gets stuck to the packaging.
Yeah. That you pull off. Oh, fuck. Now what do I do?
Split the Oreo and trying to get one side off. You get you just get the cracker on the end, and then you get everything else on the one.
Yeah, it's the Red Bull Oreo with the frosting and everything. But oh god, that was Q1 and Q2. It was pretty eventful. You had strategy. You had drivers and teams discussing whether the track was dry enough to actually put slicks on or keep intermediates or whatever it might be. Well, Alex Albon and Williams, with that shitty floor that James Vowles discussed, and we discussed before, Alex Albon destroyed Williams, Jeff Pope, if you're listening, Nick Villanacci, dude, you should have bet on him for Q2. I don't even know if you can, but dude, that was awesome. Alex Albon qualified P1 in Q2. Nothing else happened. It was just pure strategy.
Very similar to the Kevin Magnussen like pole sitter in Brazil before speed. Like, that he's not going to go win this race, but it is so exciting to see this happen. Like, just a win for the good guys here. Like,
well, it's like we've discussed this in the past. Alex Albon raced for Red Bull, kind of had the shit end of the stick. He didn't really perform near as what anyone thought he could.
He would have a race win if not for Lewis Hamilton.
Either way, it's good to see him actually do well. It's like when Lando Norris got his podium, he got second to Danny Rick at Imola. It was great because they can be there, but they just didn't have the car. Well, to see him qualify P1, that was awesome. The other thing in Q2 that happened that is worth noting was, I'm going to read down who was out in Q2. Pay attention to the names. So it was Bottas, Magnussen, Stroll, Checo, and Leclerc. I was on my soapbox earlier this season about how Checo could win world championship. Yeah, that shit's gone out the window. I think he's fighting for his job. I think Red Bull is extremely ahead in the Constructors' Championship. But that's not to say they will be next year.
In the last 3 races, Checo Perez has proceeded to fail to see qualifying 3. But McLaren has had double Q3 at least 2 of the 3 times, maybe a third time. I don't know if it's all 3.
No. Only one the time before that.
Okay, so twice.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that you have arguably the fastest car that this sport has ever seen, and you can't even make it into not even the top 5. You can't even make it into the top half of the field. What are we doing, Checo? What are we doing?
Pathetic. I mean,
it's atrocious.
I was looking at some stats that people were putting out on Reddit, and apparently Checo is 4-4 versus Lando Norris in qualifying this season.
Yes.
Things you love to hear.
And that's not to slight Lando, but McLaren's car has not been anywhere near like the Red Bull car this year. Like, that's terrible.
No one is near that car.
I mean, I feel like I'm just beating a dead horse every week saying the same thing about how I'm disappointed in Checo. And at this rate, it's like, I feel like the only reason he would keep his job is if Red Bull can't find anybody good that would want to pay second fiddle to Max.
Yeah.
And it's just trash.
I think they start playing. It's not even about second fiddle to Max next year. I think it's about someone who can be consistently top 5. I think as long as Max is finishing 1 or 2 every race next year, and then the second driver, Danny Rick, whoever that might be, Checo, it could be, but whoever finishes top 5 consistently, Red Bull's guaranteed one of their constructors.
First place plus a 12th place finish is less than a second, third finish in terms of points. So it's like you've got to step it up, especially, which we'll get more into the race in terms of, we talked about upgrades previously, but we're starting to see some closing in on at least Max. It's like, I'm going to start calling Checo Perez the Ryan Day of Formula One, because nobody is doing less with more than Checo Perez has done in the last 3 weeks. It's like,
we're going to stop there with beating that dead horse, because everyone who listens gets it. It's a shame.
It is.
That was Q2. Like I said, Alex Albon qualified provisional pole P1 in Q2. And then out was Bottas, Magnussen, Stroll, Checo, and Leclerc. Leclerc, same thing. Ferrari's going to Ferrari. We're just going to move on to Q3. In Q3, our beloved McLarens, Chandler said earlier, got a double Q3 appearance. I was extremely excited. At this point, the track is still, it's up in the air. Is it going to be all slicks? Is it going to be intermediates again? You don't really know what's going to happen. But Oscar Piastri goes out on the track, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is his first time racing in Canada.
Yes.
So first appearance at this track, and he gets into Q3. Amazing. Well, unfortunately for the Rook, he crashes with 7 minutes and 11 seconds left. He backs his car into the wall. It does damage, but it's not critical. But that was the end of his qualifying session. So I talked earlier about, like, if you get a red flag, you should be out for that session. That's damage. So he's already going to be out anyways, because obviously they're not going to fix that in 7 minutes.
The mute point of that stage in the game.
Yeah, exactly. So Oscar Piastri crashes. He had an opportunity to catch the car. So he kind of had a little bit of understeer, and then the car snapped, and then he caught it, and then it snapped again, and then it just went back into the car. He ran out of real estate. I don't think there was anything he could have done there. He was just pushing. It was a qualifying lap. He was just pushing.
I don't think it was anything crazy wrong. Like I said, Canada could be unpredictable. There's not a ton of like elevation changes, but the track always produces, whatever variable you're not expecting. And I honestly just think it's another just unfortunate charge to the game,
You talk about unfortunate things that happen. Well, unfortunately, we had a team that surprised the hell out of all of us. They got into the top 3 qualifying efforts. At the end of Q3, we had Max Verstappen. That's not the surprise. We have Fernando Alonso qualified 3rd. That's not the surprise. The surprise was in P2. Provisional P2 was Nico Hülkenberg.
My man caught fire in FP1 and then caught fire in qualifying, if you know what I'm saying.
I do, but you notice I said he got provisional P2.
Yeah.
The reason why I say provisional, because at the end of Q3, that shit ain't provisional, except for in this case, was Nico Hülkenberg, Carlos Sainz, and Lance Stroll all got 3-place grid penalties to start the race. What did they do to earn these prized possessions of 3-place grid penalties?
So in typical Haas fashion, I mean, I couldn't write a script for it. The red flag was signaled, and Nico Hülkenberg was essentially already going like too fast and couldn't slow down fast enough to like the appropriate speed. And typically the FIA levies, I think it's like a 10 grid place penalty for that. But they essentially acknowledge that, oh, hey, well, we know you tried your best, but you still violated the rules, so we're just going to hand you 3 grid places anyways.
Which made no sense to me, right? Because there was we'll talk about it, but the FIA was very sketchy this weekend. It started with this penalty with Hulkenberg. They were saying that there were like reports that Nico went too fast. They called red flag. He went too fast in order to finish his qualifying lap that got him Q2. Well, that's bullshit because your lap's deleted regardless as soon as it's
the timer system stops.
Yes. Yeah. So that was bullshit. And then you heard reports of, well, after he finished his qualifying lap, and the red flag was out, he kept going. Well, that's bullshit because he just got Q2. So why would he keep going at a full pace? That didn't make any sense to me. There was not really any information or evidence on what he did. So that was kind of like, FIA, is Massey back in the box? What are we doing here?
No, I'm glad you said that because I really hate to say it, and it's kind of a shame. Like, when people say like, it's a shame when the referees try and make their presence known in the game. Like, thank God we had a good race this weekend overall, because if not, the steward's presence would have been what was talked about, because it was very weird. And I'm not going to say it's good. I'm not going to say it's bad. It's not going to say like across the board each side. It was just very weird how they dished out some rulings this weekend. So I'm glad you said that.
Maybe they were filming an episode of Black Mirror instead of Drive to Survive, because it made no sense what the fuck they were doing this weekend.
You're right. I agree with that. It's just like, it's kind of like can we have some? They were Alpine. Can we have some freaking consistency here? Like,
yeah.
Well, I was going to say maybe they're off getting those $3 beers and $2 hot dogs that me and Chandler loved so much.
On this day a year ago on the day of the recording a year ago was qualifying day, and we found that we learned on Friday afternoon it was $2 beers, and but it was only Heineken, because Heineken was an F1 sponsor, and I think they had a significant sponsorship in the Canadian Grand Prix specifically. And so they only sold Heinekens. It was $2 Heinekens. So what did me, Patrick, and Chris do? We just bought 2 cases, or we bought a full case. We're like, can we just buy a case of 24 of them for $48? And the guy was like, I don't see why not. So there's me carrying a case of Heineken to the grandstand and like
pouring down rain.
Yeah. I'm telling you, like, they must have been on some of that Heineken this weekend in Montreal.
I didn't see one bottle or one can, so maybe y'all just drank it all last year.
I'm telling you, I've got the video of all of a shotgun, and it is a fantastic memory.
Yeah, so that was Nico Hulkenberg's penalty. Lance Stroll and Carlos Sainz, they also got a 3-place grid penalty. That was for impeding on track during Q3. They were guilty. Carlos Sainz was the most guilty because he did it multiple times throughout all 3 qualifying sessions, where right before the start of the lap, he would just fucking stop in the middle of the track. I don't know what his end goal was. I don't know if it was to back up the cars behind him, but they were on fucking flying laps. It's like, dude,
he just thinks he's the only racer out there.
He knows better. He finished here. He finished second here last year. He knows better,
bro. He's been in Formula One for years and years and years.
That's what I'm saying. He knows better. The ignorance is no excuse. If he's like, I didn't know they were behind me. Like,
yeah. So those 2 got a 3-place grid penalty, but that was the end of Q3. I said it earlier. It was the provisional was Verstappen, Hulkenberg, and Alonso. Well, after the penalties were assessed, the starting grid was in first place Verstappen, second place Alonso, and in third place Lewis Hamilton. So that was great for Lewis Hamilton to stay on the second row, move up 1 spot, and it actually ended up working out during the race. But before we get to the race, let's move from qualifying over to Pat's paddock to get some $2 beers and some glizzies or whatever you were.
Yes, sir. All right. So welcome back to Pat's Paddock, everybody. So this week we're going to talk about the safety car and the virtual safety car. So safety car actually, I think we were discussing it. It had been first used exactly 50 years ago from this weekend. The current driver, his name's Bernd Maylander. He used to do a variety of racing series, and he's actually been the driver of the safety car since the 2000 season. I think he's only missed like less than 5 races since then, just from various injuries. Now, the safety car gets deployed whenever there's an immediate hazard, but the conditions do not require the race to be interrupted. So what this means is usually when there's a crash or a car stopped on the track or some debris, but the drivers can still navigate around it as long as they slow down. So it doesn't necessitate like a full stop that could take, hours for a full cleanup. When that's announced, safety car goes out, and all the drivers can actually catch up to the safety car. So you'll see everybody bunch up in a nice little neat line right behind the safety car. We're not going to talk about 2021, but any cars that have been lapped, they'll get a signal that they can unlap themselves, at which they proceed around the track and then line up back at the back of the pack again. You can take a pit stop if you want to. A lot of the times this can be a very big gamble or very fortunate. We saw pretty much both sides of that coin this weekend, which we'll talk about later, as it shortens up your kind of time loss by about 10 seconds usually. Another thing that you'll typically see is there's actually a couple etiquette rules behind the safety car. So cars actually have to stay within 10 lengths of the car ahead of them. And if you're the front car, that obviously means staying within the safety car. We used to have drivers that would try to back up the pack so that then they could launch first and get everybody else behind them on a slow start. Another thing that you used to also see is there's actually a pit line where the safety car will enter the pits, and then adjacent to that on the track, there is the safety car line. This is where the race actually restarts as dictated by the leader. And what we used to see is if Max Verstappen, typically, he's the main culprit of this. If he was in second, he would pull up right next to the other car where he wasn't overtaking, as you're also not allowed to overtake under the safety car, and then would try to use that to get a jump and take first. Now, kind of mini safety car, or as they call it, the virtual safety car, doesn't actually involve a safety car at all. So this is essentially just enforced.
It involves imagination.
Hey, look, you just got to imagine. We don't have all the graphics that we can throw up.
Yeah.
So the virtual safety car, this gets enforced whenever they don't completely warrant a full safety car where they need to slow down to 80 miles an hour or whatever, but there's still some hazard on or around the track that requires the drivers to slow down. The main kind of difference, other than there obviously not being an actual safety car, is that the drivers slow down to a specified delta, which I think usually is about 30% of their normal speed. But they can't actually catch up to the cars in front of them, and so it'll still maintain the gaps between all the cars. It was implemented in 2015 after an incident with Jules Bianchi, and it's not nearly as heavily used as the virtual safety car, but it definitely provides it so that it doesn't kind of hinder, people that have earned their places or earned a gap to other drivers.
So, Pat, I have a question in regards to the kind of difference of it is that obviously, so when we have a full safety car pulls in, then it's essentially at that point up to the driver to decide when to start. Virtual safety car, is the restart still up to the driver, or is this more of automated amongst everybody?
So during a virtual safety car, what'll actually happen is there's a notification that's sent to the drivers. I think it's either 10 or 15 seconds ahead of the restart that just tells them, hey, in 10 seconds, we're actually going back to full race speed. So it just gives them a little bit of warning, and then it's, wherever you're on the track, you just go.
Yeah. So it's not based off pace, but an important aspect of the virtual safety car versus the safety car is DRS. So the drag reduction system, like Pat has talked about before, you have to wait 2 laps after a safety car to be able to utilize that. Virtual safety car, you can use it right away as soon as VSC ends. So that's a huge aspect on teams and strategy, especially those who come in a pit during these virtual safety cars, whatever it might be. We move from Pat's paddock into the race portion of the Canadian Grand Prix. Well, Pat's paddock hit the nail right on the head. Nothing happened during lap 1, lap 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nothing happened. Uneventful. It was just one long train. That's all.
Good
that
to see
happened.
a clean getaway. I'm always a fan of a good clean getaway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, lap 7, not so much. Logan Sargent brings out the
virtual safety car.
There it is. Yeah, your imagination. So it was kind of a shame. I mean, Williams, they're just when it rains, it pours, and when it pours, it's Logan Sargent. His car, that was pretty much it. It was shit from there. But the good part about this VSC, like I talked about, you don't have to wait 2 laps to use DRS. Once VSC ends, you can use DRS immediately. Well, Logan Sargent, lap 7, his virtual safety car, ended rather quickly. I think it was maybe a lap and a half. It was not even 2 full laps.
It was really quick.
Yeah. So it was a nice change of pace because normally when you see something like that, it takes fucking 5, 6, 7 laps. And you just have to hear Crofty and Brundle showing the replays of the start for 12 minutes. It's like, okay, let's get on with this fucking thing, you know? But that was VSC. For the actual safety car, that also came into play on lap 12. Chandler, your favorite person ever? What happened? Lap 12.
My man, George. And if someone's going to lose it on that racetrack, that's the spot to lose it on. I'm not sure the exact turn numbers, but basically it is a hard right, immediate hard left to kind of go straight. So it's fast. And we saw that in person, Patrick. You can attest to like that is a fast 2 turns right there. So he really just kind of lost the rear end. Rear end went right into the wall. And as I PG-13 rated would say in our group text is get screwed, George. Because I'm not a George fan. I was a George fan when he was on Williams, but then I realized that once he left Williams,
sell out.
He inherited. He was cocky on Williams, but you can be cocky on Williams when you're putting your car in Q3. Like Alex Albon has every right to be cocky about whatever about how good of a driver he is. But whenever he went to Mercedes, he embodied the Mercedes way and became the most just better than thou like person possible. So that's why I'm not a fan of George Russell.
Posh.
But
he's very posh.
Yes, that's a very good word, especially for a British man. He's very posh.
Yeah.
But no, he, in all honesty, like bias aside, he just lost the rear on the spot where the rear is most likely to be lost. You're racing hard. Is what it is. It's where we saw. It's the same exact term where in 2019, Sebastian Vettel was pushing hard, ran off the track, and the whole controversial had to give the place back, whatever. So we've seen this before. So I'm not going to chalk it up as like, haha, you're just an idiot, George. But he lost it, and brought out a safety car. I mean, honestly, like I'm actually kudos to the Mercedes. Either I don't know if it's the reliability team. Good God, me trying to say that word is a farce in itself. But reliability team, and then also George and itself to be able to keep that car going, to bring it home to get whatever repairs they needed to, because it looked like it brought out a full safety car, rightfully so, because there was so much debris on the track that kind of covered everything. So it was a happy win for Chandler, who is not a George Russell fan.
Or Mercedes.
Or Mercedes. But I will give credit where credit is due and say that at the very least, he was able to continue going. I didn't think he was going to be able to continue going, but here we are. So brought out a safety car, full-on safety car. No imagination here.
Imagination.
Had the full ordeal and brought out a safety car in which we kind of got to see our first true pit stop rotations, because it was also at a good point. Lap 12, you had 58 laps left, and we have seen in the past this season hard tires can last you 58 laps or so in this race.
Well, this race weekend they were racing with the C5, C4, and C3 tire compounds. True. So it was the softest compounds there were. The
hard tires that we saw this weekend were the true medium that Pirelli provides to us. So we got to see now we're going to see some strategy play into effect.
So the big result that came from George Russell actually bending it right into the wall was the safety car. But from the safety car came 2 calls that I think should have happened that didn't. So it was noted in two different instances that Lando Norris and Alex Albon, as well as Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso, had unsafe releases. So I say that the first couple that happened was Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton. Fernando Alonso was in third place behind Lewis Hamilton. They both came into pit under a safety car. Fernando Alonso had a quicker stop by over a second, and I want to say it was like 1.3 seconds faster than the Mercedes stop. Well, what happened was Fernando was going down the pit straight, and Lewis Hamilton pulled out right in front of him. It's clear-cut, unsafe release. That's a penalty. Normally, it's around 5 seconds. That's pretty much the penalty, or you give the place back. Whatever the FIA determines that weekend. They normally say it at the beginning of the race weekend. Another situation that happened was Lando Norris and Alex Albon. Same exact situation, down to the T, except Lando Norris pulled out in front of Alex Albon. Alex Albon was there already. Both Alex Albon and Fernando Alonso had to take evasive actions, braking hard, whatever it might have been. Both those situations were noted by the stewards, and both situations had no repercussions from it. Pat, what do you think should have happened here?
I don't know what camera angle or camera feed that the FIA was looking at. Maybe they were still fixing their cameras or something like that.
Their CCTV.
Yeah, but it's bound to happen when you have a situation like this where there's a ton of cars all coming to the pits at the same time, but it doesn't excuse it in any way, shape, or form.
No,
I don't understand it. I kind of wish I could have, heard some more logic about it, but all's that we know is, oh yeah, we noted that, but that's whatever, y'all got it.
Yeah, we saw it. Don't worry. We the FIA
it has
saw
been
it, but
noted to management.
We wrote it in our diary and then burned it. I don't know what you want from us.
Stuff like this happens all the time, and like we were talking about earlier, it's about consistency. And with the FIA, it's just like there really is none. And it's like every couple of weeks we'll have some situation that, it just comes up again where it's like, why was this applied and not this? But this breaks this rule. We had it in Austria a ton where people were breaking track limits, but it's just the FIA being the FIA. And
it's very frustrating because you said consistency is key. It's not a hard call. Clearly, everyone knows Lando Norris is my driver. He is my favorite driver. McLaren is secondary to Lando Norris. So wherever Lando goes, even if that's Mercedes, that's who I will cheer for. But we were texting in our group text. Like I said, Lewis and Fernando, that unsafe release came first. And I said, hey, Lewis should get a penalty here. That's it. And while they were showing the replays, they showed the one of Lando pulling out in front of Albon. I said, well, looks like Lando's getting one too. Simple as day, clear cut, unbiased opinion, easy as pie. Well, they didn't give him one.
And what I'll say is in the timing of Lewis's being first, Lewis's unsafe release, and I'll say this, I think I speak on all three of us that with these unsafe releases, they are the driver is not at fault. That is more of the guy that's like lets them go. The lead pit crew man or like because now it's kind of getting more automated with the red light, green light. But the driver's not going to sit there if he sees the green, but looks out of his mirror and says, "Oh, there's a driver coming." So I say that to say that I'm not blaming these specific drivers, but the drivers are the ones that are involved. Lewis's versus Fernando was the clear-cut definition, in my opinion. I think I speak all three of us of an unsafe release. So that happened first. That was noted. They were investigating it. Lando's happened second. Now, what the broadcast noticed, and I didn't notice it until after the broadcast had mentioned it, is that Lando had room down the left that he was actually kind of yielding a little bit. But the problem was that because they ruled that there was no further investigation, no further action for Lewis's clear-cut unsafe release, there's no way you could go give Lando a penalty when he actually had slightly a little more room and actually it's by like 0.1%, but he did at least 0.1% more to try to avoid it. I think that if you give Lewis the penalty, then the FIA could have had a debate about saying,
Lando.
okay, I still think that debate goes, you give the same result to Lando as you did Lewis. But because they gave Lewis no penalty, there was no shot they were giving Lando, which, again, I think all three of us were in agreement that.
Yeah, we're in agreement with that. But the FIA gets its turn. All right. Like I said earlier, ball don't lie. Well, FIA makes up its own ball. You know what I mean? And if someone takes that basketball from the FIA brings out another one. Ball don't lie for the FIA is bullshit. We move on from these pit fiascos. Lap 36, Nick DeVries and Kevin Magnussen, they were just duking it out. They look like two idiots. I mean, it was so bad watching those two. They basically, a short story of what happened was Nick DeVries was trying to pass Kevin Magnussen on the inside of a turn going to the right. Well, he locked up his tires and forced them both into a runoff area. The runoff area wasn't big enough for them both to turn around, so they had to back up onto the track and turn around. Except both of them were like doing the Spider-Man meme, you know, where they're all pointing at each other. It's like, it's your fault. It's your fault. You go first. You go. So they sat there for about 30 something seconds, just twiddling each other's thumbs. It's, what are we doing here? There was no point. There was contact and everything, not major contact, but enough to keep going. It's like,
it's an idiot sandwich if you've ever seen one.
Yeah, a real one, not like a Red Bull sandwich or an Oreo Red Bull, whatever the fuck we said earlier. It was an idiot sandwich.
And I saw, I wouldn't say it was Helmut Marko after the race was, he was talking about, oh yeah, we're keeping an eye on Nick DeVries now because, I mean, he hasn't produced anything but quite literally dog shit.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin Magnussen's usually a hard but fair racer. He usually doesn't mess with anybody, but that's partially because he's never near anybody. But it's just these continual mistakes from Nick DeVries and stuff like this where it's just like, dude, get your head out of your own ass. I mean, I had just come back from the bathroom and I was like, why are we looking at two cars both stopped in the runoff? Like,
yeah. In that situation, K-Mag, I mean, being the smarter driver was like, okay, I can at least go run 70 laps and finish 19th versus turning in on the guy who just locked up inside of me. So, I mean, that's the experience of K-Mag of like,
I wouldn't say it was K-Mag's fault. He got tangled up with him, but K-Mag had nowhere to go. I mean, like I said, DeVries locked up on the inside. K-Mag could not make the right turn. Shit happens. That was pretty much the end of it.
If I'm not mistaken, that's the same turn that George hit the wall, right?
No, kind of.
It was,
it was, but it's like the turn was,
that's what I'm saying.
So the entry left, and they go up. Well, this happened right here, and George crashed on the exit over here. So that first turn to the right, the hard right, is kind of where George kind of initiated the loss. Okay, so it's a tricky turn, but I mean, DeVries locked up for 75 feet. It's just shitty braking practice by him.
Well, skid marks the size of a Canadian football field.
Speaking of skid marks, the thing that got me, we talked earlier about the penalty that was never called for Lando Norris and for Lewis Hamilton for unsafe release. Well, I said the FIA ball don't lie. Well, they found another ball to use. They got Lando Norris for something. We'll talk about it, but you guys, they said that Lando Norris got a 5-second time penalty for unsportsmanlike behavior. I mean, this dude wears a fucking priest collar and a nun outfit. He wears a rosary. This dude's a saint. On and off the track, he's a saint. Yeah, I'm his number one fan.
Off the
I'm
track,
his number one. He's a dude. He's a nice ass person. I don't know him, but publicly, he's a nice person. To say he did something unsportsmanlike, granted, this is competition at the highest level. What the fuck could they say? They didn't even specifically say what he did, right?
We still don't know. Here it is Monday at 8:45 at night, and no statement has been released. I'm sure they may have had conversations with McLaren, but we still don't know as a public. Normally we see the like official letterhead of the FIA and Formula One of like incidents that happen or like so-and-so's been called to the stewards. We still don't know exactly what that is. Like we're going off speculation of what it may be.
It's just like, bro, I just want to know. It's like you can't just, assess someone a penalty for being bad or something like that. I mean, it's like, did he do something like earlier during the safety car? Like, was he keep going outside track limits or something like that? But literally nobody knew, and I don't think anybody's going to know.
There were claims that Lando Norris slowed down the field during the safety car that George Russell caused earlier. They said that Lando Norris slowed down so much he backed up the field and then sped into the pit lane in order to get ahead of his teammate Oscar Piastri so that they could double stack. That wasn't confirmed. Lando Norris specifically said that he didn't plan on pitting, so there was no point to stack everyone up if he didn't plan on pitting.
Yeah.
Until the turn into the pit lane where McLaren's like, box, and he did. So there was just, we talked earlier, like the FIA was so like weird this weekend. They didn't say anything specific for anything. They didn't say why it was just noted for the unsafe releases, not a penalty. They didn't say why Lando Norris was unsportsmanlike. They didn't say anything other than the 3-place grid penalties during qualifying. They didn't explain any of their decision.
This kind of gets into the situation where in 2021 and prior, you had a race director that was consistent throughout the whole season. And I know Michael Massey, say whichever side of the line you fall on in the 2021 Abu Dhabi finale. But in 2022, what Formula One and FIA started was we're going to, instead of having someone that's completely biased all season long, we're going to rotate out stewards. And so I think that leads to the inconsistent. And we saw some of it last year, but in the grand scheme of things last year, I don't remember any inconsistencies. And this may be just recency bias, but like this season, we have seen some very inconsistent ratings. It's a rank like rulings. So it just kind of like, again, like if you're going to make a ruling, like man up and say, this is why we made the ruling. At least like when Lando Norris doesn't know, even 3 hours after the race when he's being interviewed, that's kind of a big deal of like the people that you're ruling for don't understand exactly what's preventing, like what's to stop Lando from doing this in Austria 2 weeks from now if he doesn't know what he did in Canada or somebody else in the field, not even just Lando, anybody.
The big thing is Lando Norris got penalty points for that. Now, if they showed a video or they put out a press release saying car number 4 slowed down, below the delta at 30% slower than the normal pace and then sped up to the exact delta as he was getting around the corner. Okay. That's proof that, we trust that that's proof that Lando Norris actually slowed down, backed up the field, and then sped up. It's not that difficult. They have all the data. They had something to make that penalty call because Lando Norris lost a bunch of spots because of it. He lost out on points because of this ruling. I think we've talked about Lando Norris's penalty enough. It's frustrating. The FIA didn't clarify anything. Even to this day on Monday night, the FIA still hasn't said anything specific what happened. But we continued during the race. George Russell, we said earlier, he crashed on lap 12. Well, Chandler talked about Mercedes got him back out there. It was awesome to see him actually get back out there because he hit the fuck out of the wall. There was no reason why his car wasn't retired lap 12.
As soon as George hit the wall and keeps on going and they throw out the yellow flag in sector 2 and then sector 3, George's engineer just goes, hey, that's a yellow flag. And George's response was like, I know, that's me, mate. Thanks for letting me know. So it's like, what was George's engineer like looking out? Like he didn't like ask like, hey, how's the damage or anything? It's like, was the man sleep at the wheel like over in the pit wall? Like that to me was hysterical. Like that's the meme going around on social media right now. I was like, yellow flag. He was like, George, like, yep, that was me, mate. Thanks for checking in. Like
that was the meme, or either Max, Randy Johnson, Verstappen. Max hit a bird at the beginning of the race. I said his radio popped on the TV and said, I think I just hit a bird. I hit a bird.
Yeah.
And then that was the last you heard of it. You're like,
that's it.
It's like, what, bro? What? Dude, you're going 200 something miles an hour. You hit a bird. That's like not the end of nothing. Well, come to find out later on in social media throughout the race, Red Bull posted that Max Verstappen had a bird in his brake duct the entire race. So just goes to show you what's good for the goose ain't always good for the gander. But we move in, we keep moving on to lap 55. Like I said, George Russell retired from the race. It was just he didn't have a goose or a duck or a chicken, whatever other kind of bird you want. George Russell didn't have that in his brake ducts, but unfortunately the damage caused from his wreck on lap 12, it forced him to retire. His brakes were overheating too much and they couldn't solve the issue. He had moved up a bunch before he retired, but at the same time, he still wasn't in the points. It was just too slow. So Mercedes retired him. And that was the last memorable thing that actually happened during the race.
Only thing I will say, and we're kind of continuing the Max comedy hour, was probably about lap 63 to 65, where in the same exact turn that George bended and that Nick DeVries locked up, is that Max cut it awful close. Like he got some air off the sausage, not the sausage curbs because they weren't, but he got some air off the curbs. Proceeds to radio in and was just like, "Oh, I almost lost it there." Literally laughing over radio transmission. To me, is like the amount of confidence the man has in that car to just shrug that off. Because you know that if Nick DeVries or Logan Sargent locks it up like that, their sphincters are all like that. Like, I mean, but Max is over there laughing about it, like just a testament to just how good of a driver, how one with his car he is. So
he really is. He's reached nirvana in this Red Bull this year, which is great. I mean, I said earlier we talked about the predictions for the Canadian Grand Prix. Well, me and Pat successfully predicted it. Max Verstappen came home with the win. Pat, tell us the two records that Max Verstappen broke this past weekend.
So I think the biggest one was that it was Red Bull's 100th win, of which they came into F1 in like 2003 or 4. So, that's a pretty big deal for them doing that in, 20 years. Some teams aren't even close to that. And then the other one was that he tied Ayrton Senna for all-time race wins, which, it's a pretty big deal to be on, it's like top 5 in a list now or something like that. Of which, he's got plenty of races to win ahead of him, obviously. So we'll see, honestly, how long it takes him to just catch up to like Michael Schumacher and Lewis at this rate.
Do you think that he'll eventually hold the overall number 1? I mean, I know that's a couple years, 5 years out ish, depending on their pace after 2026. But do you think that he's going to get there, or do you think that he's going to kind of like fizzle out? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
I think he'll get there, or at a minimum, within, I'd say 5 wins of Lewis at this rate. Especially just because it looks like none of the other teams have anything figured out yet. And, 2026 is a long way away, but, Red Bull's already prepared for that. So I definitely think he can do it, barring, some crazy injury or crash or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. No snowboarding for Max Verstappen in the near future. In the Canadian Grand Prix, you had Max Verstappen, like I said, finished first. In second place, you had Fernando Alonso. And in third, you had Lewis Hamilton come in.
This is an all-time podium in the fact that, so we've discussed it before, that the winning team, so for this race, Red Bull's winning team sends a representative up to the podium to get the Constructors Trophy. We had Adrian Newey on the podium. If that is not a true Mount Rushmore of a F1 podium with Max, Lewis, and Fernando, plus Adrian Newey, who is, at this point, I'm going to say inarguably the greatest designer of a Formula One car.
Yeah.
All on the same podium. Like, that is a picture. Like, if I don't know if Formula One has a specific museum or if the FIA, that a picture of that podium needs to go in the museum.
Yeah,
like, I don't know. Who knows? We may see this more often a little bit, but like, you don't often, because the social media, as much as Red Bull wins lately, the social media intern might get to stand up on the podium by the end of the season and collect the trophy for him. But like, to have Adrian Newey on the podium with of the 20 drivers on the grid, the 3 like most historic and legendary drivers is an all-time podium to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Another cool aspect of the final race result was the driver of the day. It was Alex Albon. I know that was awesome for you guys. We talked about him earlier with his qualifying efforts in Q2, getting the provisional pole. It was so cool to see him. I mean, he held everybody up who was faster behind him. The entire race he was holding up, but he was doing that without DRS. That just goes to show how great of a driver Alex Albon is. I thought it was awesome. Chan, any special things that you want to talk about with Alex Albon's driver of the day?
No, I mean, not really anything special. And this was something that we've talked about before on this show, but I happened to see, like, scrolling through like some of my Instagram like suggested posts, is like a post that James Vowles made, or a statement he made. I think it was back in Monaco, but it was like, I posted before this race weekend, was that the facility he went on record and said the facilities that Williams has are 15 years out of date. And he said that there are stuff that like their aerodynamics like team has been like basing their designs off of. He's like, the stuff that the Williams team's been basing it off of was 5 to 10 years out of date when he got into the business 20 years ago.
Yeah, so Alex Albon, like Chandler said, was extremely impressive in the entire race weekend, qualifying and the race. We move into the next race weekend. That is June 30th through July 2nd. That is the Rolex Austrian Grand Prix. Boys, this should be a good one. I think we already know who's going to win this one, Max Verstappen. I said earlier at the beginning of the podcast that you're no longer able to pick Max for the remainder of the season. From now on, we're going to pick the highest placing person after Max. So even if Max finishes dead last, whoever you pick, whoever finishes the highest wins. Okay. Another rule is you cannot pick the same driver. That kind of sucks because it determines who's going to go first, second, and third, right? So
yeah, we'll just rotate. I mean, we've been rotating pretty good.
Whoever wins gets to pick first the next weekend. But because I'm making the rules up as I go, Chandler, since you were the only one to not pick Max last weekend, you get to go first this weekend. So for the Austrian Grand Prix, who is going to finish highest?
I'm going to go Fernando. I don't know if y'all are going to hate me for taking him first off the block, but I'm going to go with Fernando because, again, he's consistently finishing second place, and I don't think Mercedes, although they showed improvement, they don't have enough to take him over.
Okay. Now, Pat, we could play rock, paper, scissors or whatever, but I'll let you go first because I'm a gentleman and a scholar. Pat, who is going to finish highest? Not Max Verstappen and not Fernando Alonso.
I'm going to go with Charles Leclerc.
Boy, if you don't get your...
I'm going very spicy, very hot take.
Well,
going Charles Leclerc. He's pretty consistently done well at this track. And, Ferrari had a good weekend this weekend. They actually surprisingly didn't have any crazy strategy fuck up.
So Chan picks Fernando Alonso. Pat picks Charles Leclerc. Dumb pick, if you ask me. I'm glad I let him go first, but it didn't matter anyways because I'm picking Lewis Hamilton to finish the highest. Whether it's second or third or whatever, I don't care as long as he beats Fernando Alonso. Charles Leclerc might as well just stay in the motorhome. Shit don't matter. That is June 30th through July 2nd, the Austrian Grand Prix. It's actually a sprint shootout weekend, so looking forward to that. Qualifying for that is 11 o'clock a.m. on Friday. The sprint shootout, which is the shitty qualifying that doesn't really count, is at 6 a.m. on Saturday. And then the race weekend is at 9 a.m. So we'll see how it goes. Boys, thanks for joining me again for another Figuring Out the Formula podcast episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And everybody, comment your predictions. Who's going to win the Austrian Grand Prix? Thanks.